with Donald Trump set to become president, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen now thinks we urgently need to slash spending or risk financial crisis. Oh, and Janet's, quote, sorry about the $17 trillion of national debt she left on the living room carpet as Fed Chair and Treasury Secretary. Profiles encourage, and it only costs us 17 large. At last week's Wall Street Journal CEO Summit, Janet had the balls to now say, quote, I'm concerned about fiscal sustainability, and I'm sorry we haven't made more progress. I believe the deficit needs to be brought down. Now, more progress is a hilarious way to phrase it. As Treasury Secretary, Janet's post-COVID deficits were $1.4 trillion, $1.7 trillion, and according to the CBO, it will be $1.9 trillion this year. If that's progress, I would hate to see regress. In fact, when Janet first took over the Fed, the deficit was just $500 billion, an innocent age. Janet's mea culpa comes as her own Treasury Department announces the deficit just hit the worst ever for a new fiscal year at $624 billion in deficit in just 2 months, October and November. That's almost 50% higher than last year, which would imply a $3 trillion deficit for this year. Now, I mentioned in previous videos how the 40-year trend has been that recessions tack another trillion or two on the deficit because taxes collapse and welfare goes up. So we're looking at $3 trillion when it's sunny, $4 to $5 trillion if it rains. That's not counting the wars. But it's okay, Janet is sorry. So how did it get this bad? For 200 years now, every crisis has grown the federal government. Bob Higgs wrote a classic book on this, Crisis in Leviathan, but the short is that each crisis explodes government spending, and after the crisis, it only comes down part way, maybe half. So every war, every financial crisis, every pandemic, every structurally racist climate crisis drives up the government's take, and when the crisis is out of the headlines, it never quite comes back. So to illustrate, the 7 years before COVID, deficits averaged $700 billion a year across Democrat and Republican presidents. During COVID, it jumped to $3.1 trillion deficit. Thing is, after COVID, they didn't go back to $700 billion. The 3 fiscal years since COVID, deficits are averaging $1.7 trillion. So they used COVID to seize an extra $2.4 trillion, and once it was over, they kept $1.2, half. Where did it all go? Did you see fewer potholes, safer cities, better border security, perhaps Walgreens where the razor blades are not locked up? Of course not, because the million-strong federal bureaucracy absorbs trillions and craps out DEI, regulations, and wars. It converts the whole into new power, new headcount, new mandates. Then it digs in, fighting like a cornered rat to keep what it stole. We are here. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained.com. Yellen, Biden, and Jerome Powell have dug a hole so deep we will need Elon's $2 trillion in cuts just to break even. Meaning, as Janet now admits, either Doge succeeds in chainsawing spending malaise style, or a financial crisis will do it for us. A new episode of the St. Ange Roundup just dropped on rising inflation, falling governments in Europe, how government made healthcare so bad, and debt service that's eating us alive. Check it out at Spotify, Apple, or wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.